Welcome back. Ed Martin here in the Pro America Report. Don't forget, visit proamericareport.com. Get yourself signed up for the daily email there. And also, you'll find all these segments, all these interviews I do. I put them up there as standalones. You can go check it out. And our next guest is our old friend, Hans von Spakovsky. He should be a co-host of the show pretty soon, Noah. He's on enough, but that's because he knows what he's talking about. He's a senior legal fellow over at the Heritage Foundation. He's also the leader of the Election Law Reform Initiative, which is what really is jumping out for me these days. And welcome back, Hans. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks.
So, Hans, and I should say one of your credentials, besides being an attorney and constitutional lawyer, is having served on the Federal Election Commission. So you're sort of knee deep in elections and paid attention to them professionally as well as of an interest. So let's start with Michigan. You have a piece that ran over at the Heritage Foundation, I think, on one of their blogs, but called "Michigan should not be encouraging mail-in balloting." Now, I've got my listeners paying attention to understand that mail-in balloting is different than absentee balloting, right? If you request an absentee ballot, there's lots of reasons for that. Some of the military, some of the illness. That's normal. Mail-in balloting, as Jay Ashcroft, the Secretary of State of Missouri, said a week or so ago, is when you just send someone, you say, here's a ballot. You mail them either ballots or an application to send in their ballots, and the chicanery follows. But let me ask you about this. In some states and others, is there a range of mail-in balloting? I mean, are they mailing actual ballots unsolicited in some places, or do you still have to do a dance with the clerk?
In 5 states, they have all-mail elections. That includes both Washington State and Oregon. And those states, they simply mail an absentee or mail-in ballot to every single registered voter. In other states, you have to request an absentee ballot, although some of the states have special rules. They have what are called permanent absentee ballot lists. So, for example, if you are physically disabled in some states, you can request it once and ask to be put on a list. So thereafter, you don't have to request it anymore. They just send you the absentee ballot.
I see. Okay. So what's happening in Michigan, and what are you seeing in Michigan that they're doing, and that made you think, you better write this column and lay this out?
Well, the Secretary of State there decided to send every single voter in Michigan an absentee ballot request form. That makes it easier to cheat because Michigan has lots of folks on its voter rolls who shouldn't be there, and I had a graphic example of this with a colleague that I work with. He and his siblings haven't lived in Michigan in years. In fact, he's now registered to vote in Virginia. And he tells me that his parents, who own a lake home up there, received in the mail absentee ballot request forms for him and his siblings because Michigan apparently thinks they still live there. Now, wow. What does that do? It makes it they could easily get an absentee ballot and vote in the election, even though they don't live there anymore. And remember, if you live in a house, you're a Michigan resident, and you get one of those forms for somebody who used to live at your house, well, it's easy now to use that to get a ballot because, look, the ballot's got the name of that former voter and their address on that envelope.
Right.
So that's going to make it easier if you want to commit fraud. And look, there's just no reason for this. There's no reason we can't vote in person when we're all going back. We're all going back out to restaurants, and the country's opening up. We can certainly vote if we're able to go to the grocery store and go shopping.
We're talking with Hans von Spakovsky. By the way, I want to go back and ask you about Maryland and D.C. and other places where they're having this. I do want to tell you something on the radio so people hear about it. I had a guest on my show the other day, Idaho state rep and running for re-election. In Idaho, if you request an absentee ballot or maybe a mail-in ballot, there's a law that says that the clerk has to alert the candidates who requested that so that they can send mail to the person. And so my friend was telling me she sent mail to these people that requested it, and it came back, address unknown. In other words, somebody was gaming the system. Now, we haven't gotten to the bottom of it, so I just tell you that so that's one to remind me and you to talk about off the air, meaning there's lots of ways that irregularities can happen. But Hans, why isn't some of this making it so that we do say things. I've never really wanted to do this because I think intuitively it feels like it's not, I don't know, I don't want it. But why don't we say, hey, look, let's make it really easy on election day for you to get there. Let's make it a national holiday. I know people don't want to. There's lots of breakdown on why. But if the argument is, if you would trade me, if you said, hey, Ed, well, I'll give you election day as a national holiday and you don't have to vote. It's not, I don't want to do mandatory voting like Australia, but it's an election a holiday. But there's no more of this 3-week early voting, and because we're going to make it, you vote on the day like it always was. What is that? What's your concern on that, or is that something we ought to be thinking about as a way to cut short, get on offense on the argument about making an argument for quality voting?
Look, I don't have a problem with that. I think early voting is a bad idea. I think no fault absentee voting is a bad idea. I mean, folks want to make it a national holiday, so nobody can argue, well, I just can't make it because I've got to work that day. I don't have a problem with that. I don't actually think that's really a significant issue for that many people because polls are open 12 hours a day in most places. But I don't have a problem with that. And look, one of the problems with all this mail-in voting is, people are used to getting results very quickly at the end of election day. That isn't going to happen. And that ain't going to happen with all mail elections because processing absentee or mail-in ballots takes much longer than regular ballots, and it could be weeks before we find out, for example, who's been elected president if we switch to all mail elections.
Well, and now I'm going to put you on the spot because I should know it too. I mean, we're talking with Hans von Spakovsky, but am I wrong that there's a constitutionally mandated date that the Electoral College has to meet? I know the left wants to throw that out. They'll make that another argument. But if we go November 3rd and we have, California, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and 3 other states, so it's 5 or 6 key states are counting ballots and they're still just counting. They don't have results. You could blow past the deadline of the Electoral College. I can't remember when that is. But it's maybe the first week of January. I don't know when it is, but back. I don't want to get off track because I want to make sure to get this. Maryland and D.C. and mail-in balloting. Tell me what you know about that. We talked off air a little bit about that.
They had huge problems. They just held their primaries, and both jurisdictions try to encourage all these people to vote by absentee ballot. And in D.C., for example, they expected that would happen, so they reduced the number of open polling places from 100 to only 20. Well, there were huge lines on election day at at those polling places. Why? Because lots of the absentee ballots have been requested by voters weren't delivered by the Postal Service. They didn't get them. So instead, they went to their polling places to vote, and long lines because foolishly they had reduced the number of open polling places. Same thing in Maryland. In Maryland, for the primary, lots of people had problems because the absentee ballots they had requested did not get delivered to them.
We're talking with Hans von Spakovsky over at Heritage Foundation. Hans, one more question. That's the easy one. So what do we do? I mean, we're facing 120, 140 days till an election that obviously the intensity is up. There's lots of emotion. There always is. But I mean, it feels, it's the summer right now, feels intense, feels like it's going to be close. It feels. What are we going to do? I mean, right now we're hurtling towards states, governors, and legislatures making it so they're going to be harvesting ballots in California like it's strawberry season. And then down in Texas, they're going to be doing something else. But the ACLU is going to be jamming up. I mean, is there a way to think about how to make this work in the next 120 days?
It's trench warfare in every state. There have been lawsuits filed in almost every state by liberal groups, by the Democratic Party, by others, trying to force all-mail elections, to try to force ballots to be mailed out to everybody. And so there's litigation going on, and some of it is defensive litigation. Governor Newsom, for example, ordered this in California, and he's been sued by groups saying, look, you don't have the power to do this. So I don't have a clear path for you other than to tell you it's a fight in every single state over all of these issues.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Hans, as always. I hope you keep writing and keep getting out there because you're one of the most credible and persuasive voices on this. Hans von Spakovsky, I appreciate it. I'll put his piece up on social media. We'll talk again soon, Hans. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we'll take a quick break. Don't forget, go to proamericareport.com, sign up for the email there, and follow us on all our social media. Be right back.